Western foreign policy often relies on a strategy called belligerent denial, the assumption that naval power can cleanly choke off an adversary's resources without destabilizing global commerce. The ultimate target for this strategy is the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly 20% of all the petroleum liquids on Earth squeeze through this narrow waterway, carried by massive vessels like this one. If a blockade shuts down that strait, mainstream economists assume the United States is perfectly safe. And looking at the raw numbers, you can see why. The U.S. is the undisputed king of global oil production, pulling a historic 13.5 million barrels out of the ground every single day. But those top-line extraction statistics hide a fatal engineering reality. Having crude oil in the ground does not mean you possess the industrial capacity to actually use it. The modern global economy runs on frictionless digital credit, not physical buffers. Once a blockade freezes that credit, the just-in-time logistics network has a total physical runway of exactly 72 hours before the entire system trips into the dark. The crisis begins with a simple chemistry problem. The massive U.S. shale boom produces light, sweet crude oil, which flows almost like water. But these multi-billion-dollar Gulf Coast refineries were engineered decades ago to process heavy sour crude imported from the Middle East. You cannot pour light shale oil into aging towers built to crack heavy sludge without severely bottlenecking the system. This map shows what happens the moment a blockade hits. Denied their heavy crude imports, private refineries have to survive on whatever they can process. They manage to pump out valuable distillates like jet fuel and diesel, but private capital flows to the highest bidder. Refiners chase the highest international profit margins, known as the crack spread, exporting their fuel to starving European markets. That financial arbitrage loop drains the fuel supply right out of the country. Despite sitting on millions of barrels of domestic oil, billions of dollars of local infrastructure are rendered useless, leaving the domestic market immediately exposed to physical shortages. By hour 12, the physical energy shock triggers a secondary crisis in the digital plumbing of global finance. Interbank settlement systems freeze up as liquidity vanishes. The digital letters of credit that logistics companies use to guarantee payments suddenly fail to clear. Without those verified digital guarantees, fully loaded cargo ships legally cannot dock and unload their goods. They are forced to wait offshore, dropping anchor and sitting idle in the open water. Modern industrial civilization relies entirely on frictionless digital credit to function. The moment the financial ledger locks up, the physical world stops moving. Between hours 24 and 48, the digital freeze reaches the shoreline. Customs clearances bottleneck, causing massive terminal saturation. Ports become gridlocked with unmoving lines of trucks and towering stacks of trapped containers. Next comes the diesel deficit. As local fuel stations run dry, corporate fleet cards begin declining at the pump. Commercial trucking networks, the primary arteries of the domestic economy, are permanently parked. Pushing into hour 72, the freeze hits the manufacturing sector. Hyper-optimized factories operate on just-in-time schedules, holding almost zero inventory to reduce overhead. And when a single missing component fails to arrive from the gridlocked ports, those entire assembly lines immediately shut down. The final stage of this cascade ends at the grocery store. With no daily truck deliveries to restock the aisles, retail exhaustion sets in, leaving supermarket shelves completely stripped bare. The invisible logistics crisis is now entirely visible to the public. This flowchart charts the two possible macroeconomic outcomes of a prolonged blockade. Large, diversified economies head down path A into a structural depression, marked by severe stagflation and a shrinking GDP. But for fragile, import-dependent nations, the route follows path B. Here, power grids fail and water treatment plants lose power, triggering a total systemic collapse. The most dangerous trap lies right here, in the just-in-time food-energy nexus. If a severe diesel shortage prevents trucks from moving food from ports to cities, the energy crisis rapidly mutates into localized starvation and civil unrest. This is the total organ failure of a modern economy. Without fuel, power grids suffer rolling blackouts, water treatment plants lose power, and the formal economy disintegrates because it lacks the physical inputs to exist. Knowing this vulnerability exists, Beijing is actively building what strategists call an energy fortress. They are deliberately sacrificing short-term market efficiency to neutralize maritime leverage. They enforce a strict 20% cap on any single foreign oil supplier and maintain a massive 1.4 billion barrel strategic reserve. But their real defense is moving away from liquid fuels entirely. They are electrifying their domestic economy through massive ultra-high voltage direct current grids, using these towering transmission lines to substitute foreign oil with domestic electrons. To keep commercial logistics moving without diesel, they deploy automated 5-minute heavy freight battery swapping stations, erasing their reliance on imported energy to move domestic goods. National security is now dictated entirely by the physical, engineering resilience of the domestic grid. In this environment, a policy of belligerent denial functions as a suicide pact.